I hope you can see my screen and you can see me and hear me. And yeah, then we'll get started. So thank you very much for joining. I'm really glad you're here and really happy for this opportunity to share a really special story. A special story that involves some of the folks you see here on the picture. And yeah, I'm going to start us off here with couple of notes of what we're looking to do today. Sorry, I'm in the evening here in the Netherlands, but it's afternoon for you, for most of you, I assume. But I understand there's people from all around the world. So yeah, if you want to use the chat, I have another screen open so I can see the chat if you have questions. So feel free to jump in anytime and I'll respond when I find a moment. I'd like to go over a couple of things that I'd like to share with you. One of them is just looking at different perspectives. I'm going to share a short little bit about my story. Then I'm going to share a video that I've created with youth on an educational canoe trip down the Columbia River in British Columbia. And then I want to share the stories that had impact that I noticed that the students were really impacted by, that maybe you can keep in mind for when you're creating your lessons and you're inviting people to share stories with your students. And we're going to look a little bit at your own story. I have an educator's guide that's almost complete that I'd like to share a little bit with you already about. And see how we can help you apply some of these learnings that I have learned about this type of education that I'm about to share with you. So here we go. First of all, I always like to reflect on the bigger picture. And here is, of course, a very, very zoomed out big picture of us here on Earth sharing our stories, all the stories taking place on this beautiful planet and sometimes called the blue planet. So yeah, no human borders visible. Just mostly water is what we see here in the clouds, in the atmosphere, and in the oceans. And when we look at the world flattened in a map like this, this is not a map of countries. We're mostly used to seeing maps with human boundaries, such as countries or provinces. And this is a map, as you may recognize, of watersheds all across the world. And when you look at these watersheds, one thing that I find really fascinating is that they look a little bit like veins in a leaf or like the blood in our blood vessels. And yeah, it makes me think about the rivers and how they are like the lifeblood in our water systems, in our earth. And so that's how I'm connected to the story. So today, I'd like to share a little bit about my story of how I'm connected to my watershed. And it started off when I was a little girl growing up in the Netherlands. And I'm just back visiting here for a little bit. But normally I live and work in Jasper, Alberta, and have my home and my heart home in Golden, British Columbia. It started in the Netherlands. And when I was a young girl, I saw somebody on our local river kayaking, and it just inspired me so much. I really wanted to do the same thing. And when I was 13 years old, I finally had the chance to try it for myself and float on the river and feel that freedom of navigating my own boat. And that's something that just inspired me so much that I continued with the sport. I was very lucky to have a club that started near my hometown. And I was able to develop skills enough to be able to travel the world and see so many beautiful places around the world from the river's perspective. I was able to go paddle rivers in Nepal and experience the culture there as well. While I was there, I've experienced paddling all around North America as well as Europe as a recreational paddler, and I also used to compete. And then later, because I was so touched by the experience of rivers, I wanted to share that with as many people as I could. So I ended up becoming a kayak instructor and also became a river guide. I was guiding canoe trips in the North Canadian wilderness trips. I've then become a teacher because I really wanted to stay year-round in touch with youth that I worked with on the rivers before. And I really enjoyed becoming a teacher and but the outdoors always drew me back to the rivers. And so it was really hard to find a full-time job at a school where I could do that. And at times I was lucky. I worked in Quebec at a private boarding school, and we were able to do quite a few canoe trips. I've also helped friends who are teachers and supported them on their canoe trips when they took students down rivers, and flat water trips too, down on the lake systems, and help the students connect to these beautiful bodies of water. But one thing that happened to me along my journeys of paddling is that I've also seen rivers suffer, and I've seen them in unhealthy states, to the point where I felt saddened about it. At times the river would be a different color depending on the day and what type of paper they're processing upstream. And that's quite terrible. And my skin would be itchy, and those rivers were not it's kind of a place to avoid. And some places I've paddled were very polluted, just with lots of garbage and junk and grocery carts lying around. And it was hard, to see these beautiful places that I love so much be not in good shape. In fact, I've even paddled a river that normally is empty, and it only has water when somebody upstream at a dam will open up the water and release that water into the river. It's very unhealthy river system. And so it really made me feel more motivated as an educator to see what I can do about it. And then over time, I decided I wanted to do my master's degree, and I took my master's at Royal Roads University, just recently finished with my final research project. And I was thinking about what I wanted to do for this research project that ties me to my connection of water and watersheds and paddling, that's so dear to my heart, that I feel is so important that other people also have these experiences and see these places firsthand, and develop this caring for these places. And so I was very lucky to be able to join on a canoe trip, an educational canoe trip with youth learning about their watershed. And so I decided to hone my video skills, which I'm not, a professional by any means. I decided if I put myself out there and say I'm going to do this, then I better learn. And I did learn. And I'm going to share just a little shortened version. I see somebody here, Emily, said that she's watched the whole full film. So that's super cool. Thank you. I hope that you're inspired by it. I've created a 12-minute shortened video as well that I'd like to share tonight, to give a little bit of context for those who didn't get a chance to see it. So this is the place where it takes place, the story of the river trip with youth. This is the headwaters of the Columbia River in British Columbia, near Canal Flats. So it's just a few hours drive south and upstream from Golden, where I have my home. And the students that we gathered there, and the trip was organized by a nonprofit organization called Wildsight. And they worked together with the local school board, and they were able to offer high school credits in the summertime for 2 weeks. The students were able to go down the river and learn about this place, but also lots of other things that allowed them to give them their high school credits. And so I was able to witness this beautiful story unfold that I want to share with you. Here's just a map to give you a little bit of a visual. So this is the headwaters here of the Columbia River, and then we ended up paddling upstream towards Golden, hopped in a van, drove around, got to the Revelstoke Dam, had a good look around in there, even inside the belly of the beast of this big dam that was roaring and vibrating and very noisy, and very quite a dramatic change from being in the really calm wetlands. And you'll hear the students talk about that a little bit in the video. And then we got back on the water, which was at that point dammed. So that's a very different experience again. So seeing these places and experiencing these places firsthand is what was very powerful. And I'll share some of the stories that unfolded after the video with you. I always like to kind of go back to taking some of these human boundaries away from maps and from looking at a watershed and looking at a watershed as a whole, because sometimes the watersheds are not so healthy because there's so many different jurisdictions and so many different decision making that goes on about the land and the place that doesn't look at the whole picture. And so I'm hoping through my work now with this video project that people can see the watershed in a little bit of a different light, another perspective to see the world, and hopefully open people's eyes. So here's the video. I actually was encouraged by friends to submit this to some film festivals, and I did. And I was even accepted for the Water Walker Film Festival with the full version film that I shared the link on our schedule too. So you're welcome to watch it if you haven't had a chance yet. So I'm going to play this for us now. I'm going to just switch to this screen and make it full screen and share. No sound. Is that correct? No sound? I have to redo that, I think. Rivers, I'm going to stop sharing for a brief moment here. And I'm going to try and share it again and see if I can get it with the sound, because that would be, people were hearing it. Is that right? There is sound. I'm sorry. It just didn't have sound here for me, but I know the sound, so that's fine. We'll try again. I'm going back to here, screen share, audio, this screen, and then this one, full screen, and I'll be quiet this time. Rivers have connected me to place, feeding me energy and meaning. Being on the water gives me a sense of peace, of belonging, and a deeper understanding of where I fit into the larger watershed. My personal experience makes me wonder that it may be that we need to experience our local rivers to deeply understand their social, political, environmental, and cultural meanings in order to care for the rivers and, ultimately, to take responsibility for them. So, in the spring of 2019, I asked if I could join the Columbia River Field School on their educational canoe trip down the river to find out if hands-on learning experiences that take place on a local river could provide the solution for youth from that area and to develop a deeper connection to the river. Would youth create an attachment to a river or a watershed through this type of educational experience? I invite you to join us down the river to discover how participation in an educational multi-day river expedition might influence youth's attitudes and values towards the watershed that they call home.
I love canoeing, and I love the place I grew up in, so this is a place that I can go and I can learn about things that I don't necessarily know about and meet new people and have new experiences and have a deeper learning and deeper knowledge of where I'm from.
Learning more about the land and see the Columbia River and travel it by canoe, because I've never done that before.
It really sounded like a really cool adventure. Teens that also are really interested and passionate about science.
I grew up on this big river not knowing where the water came from, and it just never occurred to me that it could have come from a tiny little stream. Seeing water come out of the ground and it being so clean and pure and realizing that's what flows into this huge river that I've always known and grew up on. This huge thing had such humble and small beginnings. I'm really looking forward to seeing things from the perspective of the water.
It's going to be nice to get a break from technology and being out in nature for so long.
Getting away from our everyday, so busy lives and things that don't fully matter. We don't realize, they don't matter until we spend some time away to connect with the place that we came from the earth and the ground and the water and the trees.
Every day we've been doing 30 minutes of silent canoeing, and I've just really enjoyed that. It's been really peaceful, just canoeing along and looking around.
I think technically it's a place that has plants that like water, animals that like water, and a water source, but like seeing it is a completely different experience. It's crazy just how much a wetland actually does for its surroundings, and it's so cool to see what's below the surface, because when plants die in the wetlands, they decompose right there. Some of the areas of plant matter is 50 meters thick.
When we went into one of the channels, I stepped down on muddy ground and the little fish were swimming around my feet. I definitely care a lot more about the wetlands now that I've been traveling through it, and I've heard a lot of guest speakers talk about it and seen how much they care about the wetlands.
Every time we change a camp spot, or every time we move somewhere new, or even when we're paddling, I feel like I'm really at home and I'm really okay with where I am, which is kind of different than my original thoughts, because originally I thought I'm going to feel so far away from home and I'm going to feel so scared. It feels like this place is kind of like taking us in as their home, and this is our home, and nature's letting us be here. We're respecting that as much as we can. The river felt small and contained, I guess. And when you get to the reservoir, Arrow Lakes, the river that I grew up on, it feels big and it feels fast-paced and almost a little bit scary.
We camped at sandy spots a lot more, like beaches. I saw a lot of eagles there, and I did notice there was a lot of stumps from the reservoir being logged before, I'd assume.
When we went to the dams, they just said we flooded these valleys. I had no idea that there were towns and people that were lost below. It's so strange when you look at this beautiful river, especially coming from the wetlands, and you see that these people that have never been here, or even if they have been here, don't live here, got to make such a huge decision.
With the dams, the water levels changing so much, it's not really great for the environment.
Different people are seeing the river as a different thing. Some people see it for monetary value, and some people see it as, the blood of everything, and that it is so vital to our ecosystems. There are two contrasting views that could definitely impact what decisions are made in the future.
Our power is hydropower, so I respect the dams and I understand that we need them, but to what extent and what are we willing to sacrifice for that?
A lot of people growing up now feel this sense of loss for so much that is kind of disappearing from our environment and from our world, and we all definitely feel that towards the Columbia River and the wetlands.
The thing that's going to threaten it most is our changing world, our changing climate, among other things, of course. Reality is the glaciers are melting and the globe is warming and all these other things that we don't have any control over. Seeing green trees and beautiful aquatic life and mammals on the side of the river and in the river, and just seeing things be healthy. That's what I want for the future. I want my family and my future in this beautiful place to stay healthy, because healthy is the first step to being happy, and I think that's what we're all looking for in life.
I hope that the environment improves. I hope that scientists can convince people that 10 feet needs to be lowered in the reservoirs, which is what the numbers that we've been given are. I hope that reconciliation can take place with the First Nations and the Indigenous around this area. The environment is a bigger concern right now than I think money is, especially with climate change currently happening and how big of the drastic effects it's going to have in the future. Making sure that the government
sees that. I don't know if it's possible, but I'd really like to see salmon return. Canada and the US would both need to agree to get fish ladders or find a way to get salmon through the dams.
I've always been one of those people to look into the future, and I've heard people say, think 7 generations ahead. The same applies to the river. You know, if we want our kids and our grandkids to see these things, we have to keep them in good condition. We can attack this with a bunch of people, and we can keep this place safe, and we can keep it healthy and beautiful. And I think part of that is just getting out there and getting knowledge out there. So many people aren't educated on this place. The biggest thing we can do if we want to keep this place the way it is educate people and talk about it, and, you know, say something in our schools or to our friends or to our families. Educating people is the best way to keep something alive. I just want to help and push people in the right direction, but I don't want to be standing up front leading the group. I can be one of those people who are leading from behind and leading from the sidelines. But I'd really love to help make those decisions, because I do care about this area and I care about our province and our country. We need a lot of people like that to make our society work.
I've never done anything like it, canoeing for this long. I've never actually been canoeing along a river, and it's just so amazing.
Just have this amazing experience shared with other people that I didn't really know. And being outside for 2 weeks, I love it. And I've learned so much that I think I will keep with me for the rest of my life.
Paddling on the river and paddling on the reservoirs themselves have definitely influenced me the most. Seeing the sharp contrast between the wetlands and the reservoirs firsthand, and being able to focus and really look at all of your surroundings, because lots of times when you're driving through this area, you can't really see all of the beauty that's around us. This has just influenced me to think more about where I live.
Seeing where the water that flows past my hometown comes from just connects me even more to the land that I grew up on.
The river, the trees and the animals and the wetlands are definitely worth protecting, because it's so beautiful and it's needed in this world.
Water is what keeps you together, and it keeps you alive, and it's a connection. We're all connected by this massive, beautiful thing called the river, and it connects us all the way to the ocean.
We are the voice of the water. We are the voice of the water. And we must stand and protect her, 'cause without her we're nothing at all. We are the voice of the water. We are the voice of the water. We must stand and protect her, 'cause without her we're nothing at all. Water is life, this is the truth. Every cell in our bodies is dependent on this life-giving juice. Without her we die, make no mistake. All the money in the world can restore poisoned rivers and lakes. We are the voice of the water. We are the voice of the water. We must stand and protect her, 'cause without her we're nothing at all.
There, we're back. Yeah, hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got a good sense, a little bit of the trip of what you went through to learn and connect with the watershed that they call home. I hope you can hear me, and maybe a thumbs up just so I can continue on and know we're good. Yes, thank you, Emily. Great. So yeah, let's just review a little bit of the type of things that I saw take place on this trip with the youth. That came from, by the way, from all across the Columbia Basin in Canada. They applied to come on this trip. About 50% of the applicants were accepted. There were 16 youth that came on this trip to learn and to earn credits. Some went without any payments because they applied for support, and luckily the Wildside organization is able to fundraise enough money to be able to pay for the staff and to make this learning experience possible. So quite a lot of volunteers came on the trip to help enrich the learning, and I want to talk to you a little bit about those stories of the people that joined. And that brings us to this type of learning, the place-based and experiential learning. And so these students really gain so much from just being in the place and learning about the place through the stories of the people and their own stories and unfolded in these places. And the communities of the people that we traveled through, as well as the guest speakers and the natural world, the nature neighbors, as we call. And so, yeah, there's some of the stories relate more to the learning and having more knowledge about the place what we call home, and through the natural world of learning and the history part of learning, the cultural history. And so that knowledge piece, I think, is an important part of what I saw in this course. And of course, through time, then you will also be connected with your heart and start to care for these places and start to care for these people that maybe have been impacted too, or are really excited as well about these places. And there were role models of people that showed their action of wanting to care for these places and become active stewards and inspire students to do the same. So one of the stories I'd like to share with you is the story of the Beaver Lady. That's how the students refer to Dr. Annette Lutherman, who came as a guest speaker. She and her husband and a friend paddled with us for half a day. And you saw her speaking to the students with a beaver skull in her hand, and she was talking about the beavers. And she learned, she's an ecologist and has a lot of interest in recently more learning about the beavers and helping beaver habitat and so forth, and doing studies on beavers. And so she came to share her knowledge and her passion about beavers with the students. And so we were at the beach and we're learning. We have all the props and the stories. And we're in the wetlands, and there should be beavers and beaver habitat. And as we're paddling the main channel, it was really hard to find any beaver lodges or any beaver sticks or anything like that. And then finally, we paddled. It was quite disappointing. We go into a little side channel and it's a dead end, and we have to all go back. And we didn't get into the overflowing parts of the wetlands where we might see beaver activity. And then finally, she's ahead a little bit with her canoe and her partner, and she gets out into this muddy beach. And there are beaver tracks, and you could just hear it from even the furthest canoe over there. She just yelled it out, "Beaver tracks!" She was so excited, and of course, her excitement was very contagious. And so from there, she got out of her canoe in her bare feet, and hopped over a little bit of a forest edge and got into this beautiful wetlands area here, and got all the students excited, and even the ones who were quite nervous at first to become muddy and dirty. We're right there in the middle of this wetland in the muck with everybody else, learning and super excited and sharing that joy. And so that's one of the key takeaways there is, if you have somebody who's really passionate and very excited about something, the students catch up on that. And of course, we probably have all experienced that. And again, these are the three stories, right? Learn about the beavers, start to care about these beavers, and then see what we can do to help them. And she shared a story about that in the course. Another story is about Janet Spicer. We visited Janet Spicer, who was pictured here on the left here as a young person, but she shared the story to us at her age, I believe it was in her 50s. This took place two years ago, and she was very saddened still because their farm had been flooded by the dam that created the Arrow Lakes Reservoir. And so you can see here the shoreline had already been prepared. Here is their farmland. It was very lush and very beautiful. And the students were very impacted by listening to Janet Spicer tell her story. And part of it was that, it was a very emotional story. It was very sad. And Janet Spicer is very connected to the farm, to the place, and her dad had particularly picked that place specifically because it was such a good place for growing food and just that whole loss, that piece of loss of the farm and nature that was part of it. And so that they were impacted. The students were very impacted by Janet Spicer's story, and I would just hear it over and over. And so those stories of people impacted by a place, is something that you can think about in your own education. Maybe invite them into your classroom or go visit them where they live. And again, we learned about the place through the heart and the head, and then the students are starting to think about, well, what are some things we can do so people don't have to go through these experiences like that, right? To feel that they want to do something about it. Another thing that happened on the trip is that they had a textbook. This is the one in the middle. We also looked at the other two books. We met the authors even at some of the conferences, and the final event of the course was kind of like a little mini conference, and they invited politicians and scientists and so forth to talk with the students. So yeah, these books have stories that also capture the place and really allow the students to get to know and connect to these places and want to care for them. Of course, learning through experiences is what they say. There's nothing like learning from your own experiences. Experience is the best teacher. Students here on the left went through a mock treaty negotiation for the Columbia River Treaty. So they learned firsthand of what it would be like, to be in one of those roles that are at the table for renegotiating this treaty between the United States and Canada of what the future of the Columbia River will hold. Students, were given cameras, and I was really interested to see. I gave them 6 different cameras to see what they would capture and what they care about. So that gave me kind of a little bit of insight on what their experience is like as well. And one thing that I really found also very powerful is just them having fun and having some downtime in between all the intensive learning that took place. And that was an important part that stories that came back at the end over time. So yeah, I'd like to invite you to think for yourself a bit about your watershed connection. If you're in a boat or if you're walking by the shore of a water body nearby, what is the place like, and what do you know about it? What is it in your heart, in your head, the knowledge of the place that you are connected to in the watershed where you live? Maybe do you know the names of the plants and the animals, like the nature neighbors? Do you know the stories of the people of the place over time? Do you know people that are directly very connected to these places? And perhaps, maybe you've developed a specific spot that you really, really care about, and you can maybe reflect for yourself, like, what is it that makes me care so much about this one place in particular? What led up to it? And as you reflect on that, you can also think ahead already a little bit on how can you facilitate those kind of experiences for your students. And you can also think about your own actions and what are some things that you do to feel actively engaged in the stewardship of the place where you live. And is it letter writing, or is it a litter pickup or shoreline cleanup, or is it supporting an organization that does work that you support? Something like that. Yeah, it's a good time to reflect. And if you want some time right now, or maybe think about it maybe for just a minute. Let's pause here for just a minute and give yourself that time. Think about, how do you connect with your head, your heart, and your hands to the watershed that you call home? I'll give you a minute to do that. You can maybe write some notes. And if you like, you can continue that too later on tonight at another time. So yeah, I'd like to just share a little bit about the educator's guide that I've created. That's almost done, and I'm happy to share with you. Feel free to email me and ask me for the educator's guide, and it'll probably be done before the end of September. So yeah, the intro talks a little bit about the philosophy of learning and a little more depth of what I've talked about today. The part 1 is all about just the timeline of the video and prompts that go with what the students say and how that could relate to your students and their learning, and some little lessons that kind of tag on to those prompts. Part 2 are a little bit more in-depth lessons that relate as well, and then part 3 are resources. So for example, the part 1, in chapter 1, for example, the intro, there's 6 chapters in the main video, 5 chapters in the intro. So yeah, for example, time 1 minute and 34 seconds. There's a talk about naming the animals, getting to know the animals and plants that live in our local home area. So then that's something as a prompt for your students to ask them and study a little bit more about the names of the animals and plants that live right there in your local neighborhood, or even in the schoolyard. So in chapter 2, another example, at 6 minutes, 52 seconds into the video, the prompt here is, have you ever seen where the water comes from upstream of the closest river or stream near your home? So the source of your watershed closest to your home, and will you be able to go there and experience the headwaters of your watershed? So, and if you're not able to go there, perhaps go on Google Earth and visit it in that way. Chapter 3, an example is 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Nature has taken us in as one of their own, is what one of the students, Morgan, said. And the question you could ask your students, what does she mean by that? And what do you think? What are humans separate from nature, or are we part of nature? And there's a whole lesson that I've expanded on in section 2 in part 2 in the educator's guide. So this, for example, this line is where the students will be walking. This is a voting with your feet kind of activity, where all the students are gathered in the blue zone in the center, the neutral zone. And then you would ask a question. Is this part of nature? Or is this not part of nature, according to themselves? And they vote with their feet. They don't say anything. They just go to the spot. So, for example, if they really think it's very much a part of nature, they go all the way to the end of wherever they define that space to be. And if it's not part of nature, definitely not, they go to the far end, or it's a sliding scale. They can stand where they believe it fits in the item. So the item you could call out, first it would be a progression of something that's very, very much in everybody's mind, something of nature, like a wild fish. And so students go, and then they, you can invite them to explain their thinking. Why do you think that's part of nature? And then everybody returns back to the central zone. And then you can add a goldfish. What about a goldfish? Is that part of nature? Not part of nature? And then as time goes, a wooden boat. What do you think? And so a lot of really interesting discussion comes from this activity. I've done this with students that are quite young to retired professionals, and it's a very, very engaging activity. And of course, at the end, the last one would be humans. Are we nature or not nature? And so it's a really great activity. Another one, of course, is getting these guests to come to your class or visiting them in the watershed somewhere near your school. This is the crazy beaver lady on the left here in that letterman. And this is the example of the farmer that I talked about. Ecologists, people learning about the wetland, and visiting a dam, the municipal water facilities. Perhaps you can think about inviting indigenous voices. You can learn and invite them. So those are expanded on in part 2, as well as different reflection of activities, which is a really important part of experiential education. As you probably know, to have the experience is one thing, but if you don't take the time to reflect on that experience, then it doesn't solidify as well as it could. So this part here is more where I'd like to spend some of our time, where some of the things that you perhaps can do to start off the next school year, and maybe pick something for yourself, make it a little bit of an action item, and see if you can start small, and these are some of the questions that you can think about. Some of the obstacles perhaps of getting your students out into the watershed, and how can you create them into opportunities? Who can maybe help support you? Like in the trip that I shared with you, the Columbia River Field School, it was a local nonprofit organization, Wildside, that was making that a possibility. Perhaps using the video and bring the Voice of the River video into your classroom and study some of the parts of what the youth are saying and inspiring your students through the voices of the youth in the Voice of the River video. And activities through the Educator's Guide perhaps can facilitate that for you. And yeah, and I'm just anticipating what some of the students' stories will be after their experiences. What are some of the end goals of what you'd like them to feel, and what you'd like them to think and want to do in your community? Yeah, perhaps you can inspire them to be the new stewards of the watershed we all call, that you call home. Green Teacher is also, of course, a great resource that also helps inspire with lots of different ways of stepping next steps for activities. So I'm going to stop my screen here, my screen share, but I'd like you to think about that. Perhaps take again a minute or two, and then also I'm happy to address any questions you may have, any thoughts or any questions on the details of the video project or anything else. So I'll leave the screen on for now for just a minute, actually, and give you a chance to reflect and come up with those small steps, maybe something concrete. And if it's not related to this session, maybe just use the time of, maybe you've had a very full day with lots of other sessions and keynote speakers. So yeah, take a little bit of time for yourself to see how you can apply some of this so it becomes practical. Okay, well, maybe you can start sharing perhaps some of these thoughts now. Maybe I'll stop the screen share if I can find where to do that. I did a hiding on it, so now I'm not sure if I can re-find it now. Well, let's see. No, I don't want to leave. There, I found it. Great. Well, it's yeah, it gives us some time. We have about 15 minutes if we like, or less if you want a little bit more of your own time after a long day. But I'm happy to address questions, or if you want to share stories, this is a great time to do so. You can write it in the chat. Or question. I see there's a Q&A. What was the name of the organization that led the Columbia River Canoe Field School? Do they do trips during the school year at all? Yeah, I'll type the answer here. Where do I type it? Oh, there's no place to type it. I'll put it in the chat. So I'll put it in here. It's called wildsite.ca, and it's called the Columbia River Field School. It's a 2-week field course for 2 weeks during the summertime. I mean, during the school year itself, they have a program in the Columbia Basin. All across the basin, there's an effort to educate all the grade, I believe it's grade 9, and it's called Know Your Watershed. And it's also through Outsite, and it's supported by the Columbia Basin Trust. And that's an organization that's been set up when the dams were built in the Columbia Basin as part of the Columbia River Treaty. The agreement between the States and Canada that built dams. And so, yeah, Sherry says, I watched the full video today. The students made great role models. I will show the video to my students. Oh, wonderful, Sherry. That's great to know. I'm glad that it inspires. Yeah, I think so too, that the students were amazing in the way they interacted with the video and they interacted with my interview questions. And the way I selected them was that I asked all the students, all 16 of them who wanted to be videoed, and they had to sign, of course, a release to be allowed in video. And also, we're going to be the main 3 students. And so I just put all the students that wanted to be, picked in the hat, and I picked those 3 that were the main students in the video. So, and then I asked the other students afterwards too, if they felt like that aligns well with what they also experienced and what they felt, and it did. And I also interviewed them to get that storyline, cohesive storyline. Yeah, Stacy says, thank you for sharing today. Love the video, and we'll hopefully be able to share our local watershed with my students. Yeah, that would be great. That sounds awesome. Donald says, I liked your analogy of veins and leaves and veins in our body. Without them, life is not possible. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and sometimes visuals are powerful too, right? Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that feedback. Emily says, in BC as well, would love to connect with any guest speakers that could potentially Zoom in. Yeah, and now with the Zoom and those kind of platforms being more accessible now, you'll be able to probably get more of these guests into the classrooms and inspire students and get the variety of stories from your home areas. Yes, you're welcome, Marian. Glad you liked the video. Janet, thank you. You have really given me lots of ideas for our study of the Fraser River and our project Salmonids in the classroom. Cool. Nice. And there's quite a lot of effort in the Fraser River too, in terms of there's organizations that focus on the health of that river as well. So hopefully you'll be able to connect with those folks there. Yeah, another really great activity that I really enjoy with students too is going out into a marshy area and with dip nets, and in the educator's guide that I'm happy to share with you. So please don't forget to connect with me. Oh yeah, I can actually share real quick here my contact information from my presentation here. Let's see, one more slide. There it is. So if you wanted to watch, if you wanted to watch the video, the long version or the short version here, you're welcome to take a quick photo or screenshot of these Vimeo addresses. The password is watershed-education, and please share it freely. And also feel free to get in touch with me if you'd like the educator's guide. I'm happy to email that to you when it's done, so that I can help support you in this work. There's a question, Donald, are there resources you would recommend around protecting our river streams, wetlands, and lakes? Yes, there are lots of really great resources, and I have started. That's why mostly my teachers my educator's guide isn't done is because they're disorganized right now. There's a lot of different resources, and I will organize them in a neat way that will be useful. So right now I don't have any open right here. One thing that I do know is that Wildside, if you're in the Columbia Basin in BC, they are planning on doing classroom visits now instead of they weren't able to go on the river this summer. So they do a program now called, I think, Know the Columbia, and they do some activities and learning in the classrooms instead. So yeah. Yeah, please, if you're able to email me, or I can email you if you, I don't know if you want to write your email in the chat there, Donald, but I'm happy to share resources with you, even if before I have my educator's guide completed in a brushed up version. And stop screen share. There we go.